So there is a lot of interest from our listeners about the low polling for the Yes campaign. One listener has written in asking, why, oh why, is the no vote leading in nearly every state? I want to go to you, Larissa. You run campaigns for a living. Looking at this polling, is the Yes campaign failing?
On polling, yes. But I think there are lots of different ways to kind of bring into what is actually a winning campaign and what is a good campaign. I think the Yes campaign doesn't have all of those ingredients, and sadly the No campaign is kind of hitting viral moments. The metric really that I look at is not polling, because the only poll that really matters is referendum day. And if you think about the average kind of punter that's out there, they're probably repeating more of the No campaign than you're seeing of the Yes campaign. So for me, as a campaigner, that's probably one of the key, not metrics, but anecdotal pieces that we look at in terms of, like, is this campaign cutting through?
How do you change that though, Larissa? Because, the S23 says that it has more than 200 community supporter groups. They have 20,000 grassroots volunteers. And they've stood up what they say is the largest campaign this country has ever seen in a relatively short period of time. What more could they be doing?
I would say on those metrics, that isn't the largest campaign this country has ever seen. Like, that's kind of a typical mobilisation around an election. And if you look at something like marriage equality, the postal survey, look at the amount of kind of offline, decentralised events that people are just having in their communities. You think about walking down the streets full of bunting, people putting signs up, making their own signs and those types of things. Even within an election campaign, you kind of see that build up. It's lacking a bit of that, lacking a bit of visibility and that sort of stuff within the campaign. So those are types of things that you would look at. But this campaign, weirdly, isn't mobilising people in the same way. We have a lot of takes around why that is. It was interesting to see some different messaging research talking about that the kind of middle of Australia voters, when issues reach them, and talking about how there isn't a lot of empathy. But that is something that's really kind of atypical when you're talking about campaigning on First Nations justice. Like, you can't expect the country is going to be as empathetic as they are going to be on something like marriage equality and love is love and those types of things. They don't have the same lived experience. They don't know First Nations people the same way. And sometimes if you look at the status quo messages out there, particularly in conservative media and kind of the damage that was done around the Howard era, that messaging is really persuasive and really stigmatised and ingrained in the Australian psyche around how they talk about First Nations people. So that is also prevalent in this campaign and splitting people as well.
I want to go to some of that polling because it does break down the reasons why people are voting no. Paul, can you tell us about what the polling shows?
So last year, the Yes side had a very handy lead, sort of 65-35, but there's been an overall trend downwards, and now the No is ahead. In our latest Guardian Essential poll, it was 47% do not support the Indigenous voice in the Constitution, 43% do support it, and then there's 10% who are unsure, and the Essential poll does not force them to pick one side or the other. Concerningly, in a referendum when you need both a majority of voters and a majority of states, so 4 out of the 6 states, we're now seeing a dynamic where it's just Victoria where Yes is in the lead. There's also a Resolve poll in the Sydney Morning Herald today where it's just Victoria and Tasmania where Yes is in the lead. So the polls suggest that if the referendum were held this weekend, that it would struggle on both fronts, the majority and the majority of states. But, the Albanese government is saying it's not time to panic, that the internal polls are slightly better, and that, with a big campaign in the lead up to referendum day, they hope to focus people's minds on the actual question that's on the ballot and not a lot of extraneous issues that they say have been introduced into the debate by the No campaign.
That polling also does go to the reasons why people are voting no, and 58% of voters said that, it won't make a real difference to the lives of ordinary Indigenous Australians. Celeste, 60% of people believe the voice won't change or improve Black lives. Do you agree?
I think that is almost impossible to know. And the reason why it's impossible to know is because literally all we are being asked to vote for at this referendum is whether a voice gets installed in the Constitution. The structure of that voice, how it's going to work, who's going to make up the body of the voice, how much advice a government will take from the voice, that's legislation and that's all to be determined. So we can't know at this point whether or not it will make a massive difference to people. I think that, there's community members that are hopeful that it will get down on the ground and make a real difference in the communities, but there's also some that are sceptical, and that's got there's a long political history as to why Aboriginal community members are sceptical of whether governments actually have our best interests at heart.
You say that some are sceptical. You've written for The Guardian that you were undecided earlier this year. Are you still undecided as to whether you would vote yes or no?
Yeah. I mean, I've come to some sort of pragmatic decisions, which I'm not going to go into on a personal front. But, I think that a lot of what fuels my personal undecided public position is the fact that we are being fed a lot of misinformation at this point from the No campaign, sometimes from the Yes campaign. I don't think there's a lot of community knowledge as to how this is all going to work. And I think that this is why things like misinformation from particularly the regressive No side, but from other sections of the community have been able to penetrate public consciousness and lead to these sorts of polling results. A lot of people are really unaware of what the Constitution is, how it works, and what we're actually being asked at this point.
Larissa, as CEO of Get Up, you are campaigning for yes. Do you agree with that point by Celeste, though, that there's a lot of mob and community who don't understand some of the basic tenets of what we're being asked at this referendum?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our team is out there in community and yeah, that's definitely the feedback that we get in the conversations that we have. Celeste talks about taking pragmatic position, and I think there was a lot of pressure on us as an organisation around what we say publicly during this moment. So in a lot of ways, I don't feel dissimilar to a lot of mob who feel like they have to find a position on this campaign. And we felt like if we didn't support the affirmative position, we're basically dooming this thing to a loss. And so there's a lot of reasons why we had to do that, but it was such a difficult thing for us to come to a position. We have a significant First Nations staff within our team who are expert campaigners and organisers who are connected into the communities that they live in. Our First Nations team expands from metro areas right out to remote areas. And so it was a big thing because there's a lot of trust in them and feeling like they didn't want to get into a space where they were creating division within their communities and bringing in a campaign where there is a lot of mistrust of government. On that level, we felt very conflicted, but we felt like we needed to make a decision on how to do this and navigate this in the best way. And we felt like it would be okay for us to kind of work it out loud.
So it's kind of a pragmatic and slightly pessimistic sounding yes, to be honest. But what do you say to, the nearly potentially 60% of people who believe that the voice won't make a difference to Black lives?
I come from a history of activism and protest and campaigning for a very long time within my family. And I believe wholeheartedly that Black advocacy has power. It is one of the most powerful things that we've ever had. And so when I think about the voice, and I know this is extrapolating it out, I think about, you look right now in the media and who has the most platform in terms of First Nations people, and it is people that have platforms that have power, whether it's proximity to government or proximity to money. And so I do believe, even in the way that we've campaigned, that mob and grassroots community level, they do need some sort of platform. When you think about the issues that are important to communities, they would want strong speakers in that space. And I think that's what we need. Whether voice is the right model to do that, that's what's before us.